welcome everyone to the Athleticademix podcast. This is Robin Hall speaking from Sweden, and on the other side of the line, I have David.
Hello, everyone.
So today we're going to speak about an outline of a college year. We tend to do these podcasts on subjects that we often get questions about, and we think that this is a topic that we very often speak about in meetings, which is a very important thing to speak about, of course. But hopefully this episode will give you a bit more information in terms of how that outline of the year is looking. So before we get into the topic, we get into a close of 2020. We're speaking today on the 23rd of December. How has 2020, despite COVID-19, been for Athleticademix UK, David?
Overall, it's been really good. Obviously, there's been a lot of challenges this year for everybody, and not just us, but everyone we're working with, and a lot of our partners and friends have all had to deal with a lot of challenges. So we count ourselves very lucky that we've managed to plow through and do really well. The Athleticademix family is growing and growing every month, which is brilliant. Not just here, but also, of course, in Sweden and in Denmark as well. So overall, it's been a really positive year on that front. But of course, we're hoping that next year is a little bit easier on everybody, and in terms of health and travel and all those kind of things, there's no more issues, and then we can have a bit more of a smoother ride. But lots more to do with our current clients up to next summer. And for those that we have signed that are going in 2022, we've got an enormous amount of work to do with them, which we're looking forward to. But we're also really looking forward to welcoming new people into the family in the new year as well. So I'm assuming it's been much the same for you in Sweden, Robin?
Yeah, growing rapidly, I'd say. It's way above my expectations, and I know it's way above your expectations on how it's going in the UK as well. And I think that both you and me are quite, I'd say, driven. I'm a bit allergic to the word driven, but I think you and me have a tendency of not stopping and enjoy the time. We just want to move forward all the time, which is a key thing in this process, because you can never be satisfied in a college process either. You always need to move forward and need to be proactive, and I think that's being showed in our work too. But just want to stop here and thank everyone this far, families, students, and everyone involved, basically, that I've been going now for 2.5 years, and you've been going almost 2 years now, and the company is still very, very young, and we're becoming an impact in this business, which is very humbling, and I'm very, very grateful of everyone that's been involved and are involved. Everyone is still involved, even though the first ones go in. I'll still keep in touch with them just as much, and I know you do too, and we'll keep doing that, because that's the fun part about the job, about staying in touch and seeing how everyone is doing and everything. So once again, thank you all for making it happen, basically. But before moving on to today's topic, hopefully the sound will be a bit better today. We've invested in better microphones. We want to have this podcast as good as possible. As you all know, our main idea of this company is not a podcast; it's just a fun bonus thing. But we also want it to sound good, so hopefully it sounds a lot better today than the episodes before. All right, David. So would you mind telling us about today's subject that we're going to do, because we're going to break this outline of college year down a bit? How are we going to break it down?
Yeah, so today is, as you said, a bit of an outline of how a college year looks, the kind of the calendar year as such, and what parts of the year will be, what it would look like for you as a student athlete going over to the States. We're first going to talk about sort of the academic year and how the terms, or as the Americans call them, semesters, are broken down, and the time frames that they fall within, and when the breaks are, etc. What you would do during those terms, and then we'll move on to really being more specific in terms of sports as well, and how your sporting season would intertwine with your academics. So for a soccer player, it will be different to a swimmer, to a track and field athlete, or a golfer. We'll briefly kind of explain where those seasons fit in, and then your responsibilities as an athlete and a student during that time. And then that will be pretty much it, really, rounding it up to just to give you a bit of an idea of all of those things. It's a question we are often asked by prospective student athletes about, well, how much time do I actually spend competing, or how much time will I be in classes, or when will I get to come home? So hopefully the idea is that this episode gives you some of that information so that you can begin to map it out in your brain and decide if this would be the right kind of step for you.
All right, so first topic and first section is the academic year in the fall. So school starts roughly at the end of August, midst of August. So would say somewhere around the 20th of August and forward. All schools starts at different times, but that's the normal times when the school starts. So whenever the school starts, you obviously have school every week up until beginning mid-October, early October, where you have 3 to 4 days off, where you go on fall break. So all of September it's school, and then in the beginning or midst of October you have 3 or 4 days extra for fall break. After fall break, you have another few weeks of school, and then you head into one of the bigger holidays in the US, which is Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is the last Thursday of November. And you usually have 4 to 5 days off. Sometimes you can actually have more days off if you're lucky and have good teachers who take the whole week off, actually. But the official days off are 4 to 5 days. And after you come back from Thanksgiving, you're in the beginning of December. And in December, it's finals times, which is the exams that you take before getting a grade in your courses for that semesters. So the last few weeks of December, you prepare for your finals, and in the middle of December, you take those finals in order to get a final grade. So if I'll back it up, you start school end of August, you go to school whole of September. Beginning of October, you go on a fall break with a few days off. Then you go in school for the rest of October, rest of November. The last Thursday of November, you go on Thanksgiving, where you have 4 to 5 days off. After Thanksgiving, you're into December. You study for your finals for 2 weeks normally. And after those 2 weeks, you have your finals week, where you have a week full of exams. And then around the 15th to 20th of December, you head into Christmas break. Your Christmas break is 3 to 4 weeks long. You usually start your spring semester by early to mid-January. So you have a few weeks time where you can go back home to your home country to celebrate Christmas and New Year's Eve. I'd say that no matter how much you love college, it's always nice to get back home to mom and dad and their Christmas food and celebrating New Year's Eve with your friends. So looking at the first semester, you leave in the middle of August and you get back home to Sweden, UK, Denmark, or wherever you live in the middle of December. So the first semester, you'll be gone quite exactly 4 months. Let's move on to the spring and see how that academic year runs.
Okay, so the spring semester, as Robin just said, usually starts in the sort of beginning or middle of January, depending on your school. A good kind of time frame to imagine that you'd be back out there would be anywhere from, say, the 5th to the 15th of January. And you would go back into classes pretty quickly. And then that semester begins then and runs at first all the way through till March, which is the first kind of break in the semester. Which is known as spring break, something you may have heard of before in films or popular culture. Is a good time to go and kind of do things with friends. You may get to travel somewhere, just let your hair down. Different schools have their spring break week throughout March on different weeks. So you might be at the very start of March, you could be at the very end or in the middle. But that's really the main and one of the only kind of major breaks during the spring. So you'll be in classes all the way up to then, have your week off for spring break before you come back. And it then continues on to Easter time, where, like many countries around the world, there's a few extra days off over a long weekend whenever Easter falls. So that's, say, usually early April, for an example, where you might have 2 or 3 days off. But alongside that, of course, you'll be competing and training as well as going to classes too. The spring term is the same length as the fall, as the autumn. So it's roughly sort of 3 to 4 months long, and will tend to end at the latter end of April, or even in the first few days or first week of May. Same as in the fall, you'll at the end of that semester have a finals week. So a couple of weeks before the end of the semester will be dedicated to pretty much preparing or finalizing your classes and studying for the exams. And then you'll have one final week where you take exams in each class to get grades. One thing worth noting on that as well, and I can only speak from perhaps UK students' perspective, and I'm not sure quite how it is in Sweden. Robin, you might be able to add to this, but it's not the case whereas in British universities where you have big exams at the end of the year and they're all part of that one course. In the US, of course, and we've explained in previous episodes, you study 4 or 5 different classes each semester, and then you move on to different classes the following semester. So you leave them behind. So the finals exams in those classes, they are of course important, but it's only study and work from those 3 or 4 months that you're being tested on, and then you get your grade and move away. So it's not quite as stressful as it might sound having so many exams. It's more just a case of getting to the end of the term and trying to score as highly as you can to keep your average grades up. So once you're then finished with the spring semester, that's essentially the end of the academic year for US universities. So you'll then have at least 3 months off over the summer, which is a long break. A lot of students tend to head home immediately and have their whole summer back home in their home country, which is great and fine. You can certainly do that. Many people are able to then go home and potentially work, get a job over the summer and earn some money. In certain sports as well, you'll be able to go back and compete for your local teams or clubs, if that's a possibility for you. So lots of people ask about their options with that, and that's definitely something you can do. But many students, including myself, I'm not sure if you did, Robin, but I'd certainly stayed in America during the summers at times when I was out there as well, and either played a kind of semi-professional level out there in various summer leagues where you can see and travel to different places in America. I coached as well, or there's other opportunities for things like internships regarding something around what you study. You'll have all kinds of opportunities that materialize for you when you get out there, and the
Yeah.
summer is a great opportunity to take advantage of those.
Yeah, I think one thing worth noticing is that this is a big adventure for all of us doing it, of course, and you might see the US 4 year experience as a big daunting thing that, oh, I don't know if I can make it for 4 years. But while doing this episode, we want to show to you all that it's just for a matter of months where you're gone from your family and your friends, then you are able to go back home to visit them. So if we would take a look back of what we just explained, is that you'll be gone for 4 months for the first semester. Then you have basically a month of Christmas break where you can be home in your home country. After that month, you go back to the US, and then you have 3 to, at the very maximum, 4 months of spring semester. Then you have 3 months off for summer break. So essentially, you are in the US for 4 to 8 months at a maximum, if you want. But then you can be there for even longer. And as you said, David, I stayed there for a Christmas and New Year's Eve, my first year actually. And for the rest of the breaks, I was actually home. So the way I set it up was that I had a job as a UPS delivery man, and I did that for literally the moment I landed. I just went straight to the UPS just to collect money so I can go on fun spring breaks and go to NHL games, NBA games and stuff while being in the US. So for me, my breaks were actually the tough times. That's when I actually worked, and then going back to college was for me going back on holiday, because then I saved up all that money. And for me, I've always liked being in school, so studying was always been a bit of a pleasure. I liked it. It was not seen as something that was tough for me. So I saw college as my holidays. So I think that's worth noticing. And also a side note, which is a question I get quite often, is that let's say you compete in this could be an individual athlete too, but this question I get quite often from an athlete competing in a team sport, and that is that when you're back home for Christmas break, you can play, for example, soccer for your home club if you'd like. Same thing in the summer. Whenever you move to the US to compete there, you don't do a transfer or whatever we should call it. You're still being a part of your home club, and you can still compete for them while you're being home. Of course, with the advice from your college coach, of course, you should be transparent because those are the ones who've invested money in you. So just be transparent and open. But they are always open and positive in terms of you doing something on your breaks. So key points taken off from this is that don't see this as a 4-year thing. You go home after every semester if you'd like. If you feel after 1.5 semester that okay, enough is enough, I want to go back home, I want to stay home, well, then you stay home. You are never obligated to do the 4 years. You always decide yourself. And I don't know how it was for you, David, but for me it was whenever 5th, 10th of December came up, I was like, oh, I can't wait to get back to my mom, have her do my laundry, cook my food for me. I was just being a bit sick of being independent. And then I got back home to Sweden, met all of my friends. It was a blast, and it was so much fun the first week. And then after the first week, when my mom asked me 6 nights in a row, "Hey, when are you getting back home?" and texted me at 9 at night, I just felt like, oh, can I be an adult? Can you leave me alone? And then I couldn't wait to get back to Chicago. So it's quite fun how that works, that you always can't wait for the next step. So while I was in college, I always missed my friends back home and felt like, oh, it's going to be so nice getting back to Sweden. A week into Sweden, I was like, oh, I can't wait to get back to Chicago to live the big city life. So it's quite funny how you work as a human, that you always tend to wait for the next step instead of just enjoying the moment. So that's a big advice.
I think as well, it's good to have something like that. For me, is like we were both fortunate, both of us, and I know a lot of the young people that we work with are as well, where they have the best of both worlds. They are fortunate to be able to come home and see family and friends, and look forward to coming home. Obviously, at Christmas time is always very special. So that's huge to have that. But also when it's so good in the States as well, and you have your tight-knit group of friends on your team and also other people around campus that you're good pals with, and you've got that community there. You do miss it as soon as you leave it, and that's nice because it's nice to be able to always think, oh, I'm going back to something amazing, rather than you never want to be in anything in life where you're dreading going back, or you really don't want to leave somewhere because you hate where you're going to. Then it wouldn't be right. But certainly from our experiences and the 99% of people that we work with, it's the case for them as well, and that's what we love to hear and to see, and we feel it will be right for many more people once they look into it.
Yeah, and a funny side note to think about when you consider college is, I know Sweden, Denmark, and UK kind of has the same type of weather. We're not really famous for our weather, but looking back on these last 3 months in Sweden, for example, I think I've had 3 hours of sun for 3 months, and if I could have been in the US for these 3-4 months, I would have loved to. Christmas and New Year's Eve, always nice to be back in your home country. Hopefully a bit of snow. It's a cozy times. But then when it's January, February, March, I don't know how it is in the UK, but in Sweden here, it's not the best of months. But then you get back home in May when spring arrives, and then summer arrives, and summer in UK, Denmark, and Sweden, and basically everywhere in Europe is beautiful. But you're home then, so essentially you're missing the miserable months here in Sweden. At least you miss September, October, November, which is not fun, and January, February, March, which is even worse. So think about it that way, that you could have the best of both worlds. You're home for Christmas, New Year's Eve, that's always nice to be, and you're home for the summer, which is usually the best few months. So there's not much you miss.
I think
Uh,
the first January I came home for Christmas, and the first January that I then went back out to Florida for me was something like the 6th or 7th of January, and I
yeah,
left it like -2 degrees and snow here in England, and got back out to Florida and got to campus one morning after the flight, and it was like 28 degrees Celsius, or 82 Fahrenheit. So I sat by a
yeah,
lake there, sunbathing on the 7th of January, when I'd just been on a flight that morning that the plane needed de-icing. It was a
yeah,
good moment for me to realize I've got it quite good here. So
yeah.
yeah, you definitely get the best of both worlds, and that's a big message to take from this.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so move into the different type of sports. We're going to speak quite shortly about how it looks for a soccer player, a track athlete, a swimming athlete, and a golfer. So stay put, and we'll move on to the next topic.
Okay, so the first sport we're going to speak about is soccer, mainly because it's perhaps one of the earliest sports in the school year to get going. The pre-season in soccer is usually in the first week of August. So if you're a soccer player listening here, along with starting classes towards the end of August, like we said, for the general population on campus, you'll actually be there 3-4 weeks earlier. And you'll begin pre-season with your new team, where it will just be your team, potentially the men's or the women's team as well, depending on which team you're in. There'll be a couple other sports teams on campus, but no one else. So it's essentially you moving in, getting used to your new surroundings, training 2 or 3 times a day. It's very, very intense. But you get adjusted and acclimatized very quickly. And obviously, with your new teammates around you, everything becomes easier and easier as time moves on. So preseason begins first week of August. And then your season will really get going towards the end of August. Last few days of August is usually when the first competitive fixtures begin, about the same times as classes start as well. Um, and the soccer season then, on average, you'll have around 2 games per week on average, and you'll obviously train probably 6 times per week around those games. So it's very, very busy in terms of your commitments as a player. Your season runs all the way from the end of August up till around just before Thanksgiving, which is end of November. If your team has not done particularly well, they either have kind of average results or they've lost more games than they've won, it will end at the end of the regular season, which is sort of mid-November time. And that will be that. You'll finish there of having played maybe around 17, 18 games. If your team, however, does reasonably well or very well, and you win more than you lose, at least is a good general guide to go by, you will progress on to the kind of conference tournaments, regional tournaments, playoff system, and then potentially into the national tournament, which is the end goal for most colleges to get towards at the end of the year. So that's where, as we've spoken about in previous episodes, the top 60 or 65 or so teams move forward into a national tournament where you could be playing anywhere in the States. And basically, it's win or your season is done. So it's the business end of the season that takes place into November. If you get as far as possible in that season, all the way to the national finals, then you could be playing into early December, which is only a very few small select teams that get that far. But if you do, it's a very special experience. Um, so in the spring for soccer, once you come back after the Christmas break, there is no competitive season as such like there is in the fall. You'll probably play 5 to 7 different friendlies between, say, February and April, which aren't kind of, as I say, as serious as the fall, but obviously great opportunities to compete against other colleges still. And it will be games that are taken very seriously. Outside of that, you'll still train sort of 5 times a week. A lot of emphasis is placed on strength and conditioning and fitness, as well as ball work as well, and some individual sessions. But overall, you will still have a lot of time, on the practice field and in the weights room, which is brilliant. But you also get a lot more time outside of sport for obviously focusing on your studies and making sure they're up to scratch. And your free time is a little bit more free, basically. So you get some of your weekends back, some of your evenings back. It just gives you time to enjoy the whole experience and have a little bit of a life outside of being a student athlete as well. So definitely a bit more balance in the spring. But certainly by the end of the spring, early May, you're really, really raring to go for the next fall season that's coming up after the summer. So that's a little bit of a wrap up on how the soccer aspect of a college year would look. Robin's going to talk you through track and field.
All right, so for the track athletes going over to the US, you start school with the rest of the students in late August. So you do not arrive early like you do in soccer, and the reason being is that track is a spring sport in college. So you start school with the rest of the students in late August. During the fall season, you have your build-up season, preseason, or whatever you call it. You have your training preparing for the spring where you will compete both indoor and outdoor. What's a bit different with track in comparison with a few other sports is that your winter break may be a bit shorter. Your coach might want you to be there a bit earlier than the rest of the students, and the reason being is what I just mentioned is that the indoor season starts in January, and the coach wants you to be prepared. So you compete indoor up until mid March, and then you go on a bit of a short break to rest your body, and then go back into outdoor competition in April. And your spring season is or spring semester is essentially a much longer than the normal student, because if you do good and qualify for regionals and for nationals, they are being held in May and early June. So you could be a bit later back home in Sweden than the normal type of students that graduates in April. So to summarize, you start school like with the rest of everyone in August. You have preseason during the fall. You might have a shorter winter break. That being said, coming back a bit earlier in January, you compete indoor in the spring, and then you compete outdoor in the spring as well. So you mix those two up, dividing the spring semester into two parts. If you do good and qualify for regionals and nationals, you will stay after school is done in order to compete in the regionals and nationals, which are being held in May and June. Let's move on to swimming.
So swimming, just like track, starts pretty much with in late August with the rest of the student population as they move in on campus. You'll begin training pretty much straight away with your swim team. And swimming is quite unique in lots of ways as the competition kind of falls in the fall as well as in the spring also. So your competing will begin from September time. Swimmers arguably train or spend more hours training than maybe any other sport in college athletics. They're often doing, as they're used to in their home countries, early morning practice sessions as well as afternoon, and so there's a lot of time dedicated for swimmers. They have enormous amount of respect from Robin and I for the hours that they put in. As do the other athletes, but competing from September through to Christmas will be the main kind of bulk of the swim season. However, they will return and compete sort of January, February, and into March, where nationals are held if a team progresses that far up to March. So essentially, the swim season can run from September to March. However, swimmers do have a winter break, of course, to go home for Christmas and New Year's. But essentially, they will usually return to campus a little bit earlier in January than the rest of the students would, in order to make sure that they are prepared and ready for the continuation of the season in January as well. So yeah, it's not been unknown for. Well, sorry, it's not unusual for a swim program at times, depending on where they're located in the States, to go on a kind of winter break camp, maybe in early January when they return, if they're based up north or somewhere that's much colder in the winter. Some college programs have the capacity to take the team down to sunnier areas or warmer areas like Florida or Arizona, places like that, where they can spend a few days or a week just training in the sun and outdoors before returning back to campus and hitting the competition hard. Obviously, some swimmers, for example, one of ours going in 2021, Krista Wilson, is going to Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona, where they're probably looking at 30 plus degrees in January anyway. So there's no need for them to go on another trip. but that's a nice luxury to have. So essentially, just to wrap up for swimming, start a normal school year end of August like everybody else. We begin training then early September with the swim team, and that season will run through to Christmas. And you'll return a little bit earlier in January to then move forward into January, February, and if you do well enough, into March for the nationals.
All right, so last sport we're going to speak about is golf. And the reason we picked these four sports is that it's these four sports that we are working with right now. If you do any other sports, you're still more than welcome to reach out to us as long as it's being offered in college. So if we look at golf, you start school with the rest of the students in late August. And sport is actually not sport. Golf is actually a sport that you compete all year around, but the official NCAA season is in the spring. So golf is being considered as a spring sport, but you essentially start going on competitions in the fall already. So you do not have the same type of preseason that any other sports might have. Your preseason is playing competitions in the fall still, but you have just as long of a winter break as everyone else. Coming back into the spring, that's really go time, and that's when the competitions matters the most. So the fall competitions could be considered as soccer scrimmages basically, or any other scrimmages, but you do compete all year around. You have a winter break like everyone else. When coming back for the spring, you are the competitions are a lot more important, and you do the conference championship in the spring, and you do the national championship in the spring. If you qualify as a team for nationals, they are being held in late May. So just like the track athletes, you are then staying after school is done to solely compete in golf. So start in August, you compete in the fall, you compete in the spring, but the official spring season is the spring is the official NCAA season, so that's a bit of a go time. And if you qualify for nationals, they are being held in late May, so you'll be back home in early June. All right, so that is a wrap. And before logging off here and finalizing the year, because we are one day from Christmas Eve, which is big in Sweden, and 2 days from Christmas Day, which is bigger in the UK, we just want to say thank you to everyone again that are listening and that's been a part of Athleticademix in any way possible. We are so grateful for all of you, and I know I speak for both me and David saying that we're very happy and yeah, blessed to have you all on board. We will be back with new episodes in 2021, and we're gonna aim to do interviews, informative podcasts, and yeah, as much content as possible that you think is interesting. And if you have an idea of a topic or any suggestions or whatever, just reach out to us. We do this podcast for all of you, so please reach out to us to give us suggestions on what to speak about. But yeah, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you all, and take care out there.
Thanks, everybody. Merry Christmas.